3,100 years ago, an Egyptian stonemason stood in a courtroom in Thebes and described in detail how he robbed a pharaoh. He gave the tomb, he gave the method, he gave the weight of the gold and the names of the 7 men who split it with him. A scribe wrote all of it down. We still have the page. The Valley of the Kings was not a cemetery. It was a security system. No pyramids, no markers, no monuments. Hidden entrances cut into a desert gorge, sealed, buried, and denied. The single most expensive attempt at concealment any civilization has ever attempted. 65 numbered tombs went into that valley over 500 years. Every single one of them was broken into. So how did the most secretive burial ground in history get emptied? And who was doing it? We are not guessing at any of this. Egypt prosecuted these men, and Egypt kept the files. There is a papyrus in Brussels, with its other half in New York, called the Leopold II Amherst Papyrus. It contains a confession. There is a second one in the British Museum, catalogued EA 10221, the Abbott Papyrus, which is an official inspection report into the state of the royal tombs. Both are dated to year 16 of Ramesses IX, and one tomb in that valley is missing from this story, because it is the only one the robbers never finished. KV 62, Tutankhamun. 200 years older than these trials, and the exception every page of them is measured against. Everything you have ever seen from that tomb, the mask, the coffins, the chariots, is what one crew failed to carry out. Here is what happened to the other 64. Western Thebes. Around 1500 BC, an architect named Ineni is cutting a tomb for Thutmose I, and he is so proud of the job that he has it carved into the wall of his own tomb afterwards. I supervised the excavation of the cliff tomb of His Majesty, alone, no one seeing, no one hearing. That is the founding document of the Valley of the Kings. And it is a man bragging, in writing, on a wall, about a secret. The idea is genuinely brilliant. For 1,000 years, Egyptian kings had been buried under pyramids, enormous stone arrows pointing at the treasure, every one of them looted. So they stop building up and start building down. The site is chosen with care. The valley sits directly beneath El Qurn, a peak that is naturally a pyramid. You get the symbol without the signpost. Then the countermeasures. The tomb gets no chapel, no shrine, nothing above ground at all. The mortuary temple that receives the offerings is built miles away on the floodplain, deliberately disconnected from the body. Corridors turn at right angles. Doorways are plastered and sealed and buried under chip, and most tombs have a deep vertical shaft cut across the passage, probably to catch flash flood water, very likely also to stop anyone walking in. And it works, for a while. Look at KV 34, Thutmose III, the most successful military pharaoh Egypt ever produced, is buried in a cleft, high in the cliff face, reachable only by ladder. Inside, the burial chamber is cut in the shape of a cartouche. The ceiling is a black sky with yellow stars. The walls carry the earliest complete text of the Amduat, painted to look like an unrolled papyrus, as though the room itself were a book. It is hidden, it is defended, it is beautiful, and it is up a cliff. They found it anyway. Not eventually, not in the Roman period, not by Victorians. Most of these tombs were emptied within a generation of the funeral, some within a few years, while the men who sealed the door were still alive. 500 years of secrecy, defeated almost on delivery. Subscribe before we get to the transcript, because Egypt worked out exactly who was doing it, and the answer is the reason the whole system failed. Start with the obvious problem. A secret is only as good as the number of people who hold it. To cut a royal tomb, you need stonemasons, plasterers, draftsmen, painters, foremen, water carriers, and scribes. Around 40 households of them. Egypt housed that workforce in a walled village called Deir el-Medina, over the ridge from the valley, a 15-minute walk from the door of every tomb they ever cut. These men knew where every entrance was. They knew what went in. They knew which corridors were real and which were decoys, because they cut the decoys. And in year 29 of Ramesses III, the state fails to deliver their rations on time. And they walk off the job, sit down in the temple precinct, and refuse to move. It's the first recorded strike in human history, and we have it because they wrote it down. Hold those two facts next to each other. The only people alive who know where the gold is, not being paid. Now, year 16 of Ramesses IX, about 70 years later. The gold is going, and what happens next is not an investigation. It's a political knife fight. Pasa is the mayor of eastern Thebes, the city side, the living side. Pawero runs the west, the necropolis, the tombs, and the police who guard them. Pasa starts telling anyone who will listen that the royal tombs are being robbed on Pawero's watch. So a commission is appointed, and Pawero is on it. They inspect 10 royal tombs. They report 9 of them intact. One, belonging to a 17th dynasty king called Sobekemsaf, is found broken into. Then the commission crosses the river in a body, celebrating, and holds what the papyrus describes as a demonstration in the streets of Pasa's own district. Pasa says the report is a whitewash, and within days, one of the men who actually did it is in custody. His name is Amenpanufer. He's a quarryman, a stonemason, attached to a temple, and this is his statement. We went to rob the tombs. We found the pyramid tomb of King Sobekemsaf, and we broke through the rubble. They tunnel in, they find the king, and they find the queen beside him. We found the noble mummy of this king equipped with a sword. A large number of amulets and ornaments of gold were upon his neck. His head was covered with gold. They strip both bodies. They take the gold, the amulets, the ornaments, and the vessels. Then they set the coffins on fire, and then the arithmetic. 32 deben of gold, divided between 8 men, 4 deben each. A pharaoh, his queen, and their entire eternity, reduced to a share-out, and the share-out is what got written down. He was caught. He was imprisoned. He bought his way out with his own cut of the gold. And then he says this: I have continued to this day in the practice of robbing the tombs. That is a career criminal on the record, 3,100 years ago, telling a court that he never stopped. One caution, and the papyrus is honest about it. These statements were taken under examination, which in the transcripts means beating with a stick and twisting the hands and feet. Egypt got its confessions the way most pre-modern states did. It doesn't make Amenpanufer innocent. It does mean we're reading the truth through a very unpleasant filter, and the documents say so themselves. There is a second set of trial records in Liverpool called Papyrus Maya A. Read the list of the accused. Necropolis workmen, a scribe, doorkeepers of the temple, priests, herdsmen, a farmer, a coppersmith, and men from the police force assigned to guard the very ground they were stripping. That's the answer to the question. The Valley of the Kings was not defeated by outsiders. It had no outside. Every layer of security Egypt built was staffed by people who could see the treasure. And eventually, the pay stopped, and the temples got poor, and the state got weak, and the security became the leak. You cannot hide a tomb from the man who dug it, and once you know that, the state of the valley makes sense. Seti I's tomb, KV17, is the most beautiful thing ever cut into rock in Egypt. Over 100 meters long, every surface painted, an astronomical ceiling with the constellations laid out across it. It was stripped bare. His body ended up somewhere else entirely. We'll come back to that. And in 1817, an Italian former circus strongman named Giovanni Belzoni walked into it, found the alabaster sarcophagus, translucent, carved inside and out, and took it. It did not go to a museum. The British Museum declined the price. It was bought by an architect and put in the basement of his house in London. It is still there tonight. Sir John Soane's Museum, Lincoln's Inn Fields. You can walk in off the street and stand next to Seti I's empty coffin. And then there's the one nobody could find at all. KV5 sits by the main path, a few strides from the busiest tourist route on Earth. It was noted in the 1820s, dismissed as small and uninteresting, filled with flood debris, and used as a dump for the spoil from other excavations. In 1995, an American Egyptologist named Kent Weeks dug it out properly. It isn't small. It has more than 120 chambers. It's the largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings, built for the sons of Ramesses II, and it was lost under a rubbish heap in plain sight for the better part of 2 centuries. Which brings us back to the tomb that didn't get emptied. Tutankhamun was buried in a hurry in a small tomb in a modest corner of the valley, and about 150 years later, workmen cutting the tomb of Ramesses VI directly above him built their huts on the slope and threw the stone chip downhill. It buried his doorway, under a workers' camp, under a spoil heap. The most famous tomb in the world survived because somebody dumped rubble on it. But here's the part that gets left out. They didn't miss it. They ran out of time. Tutankhamun's tomb was broken into twice in antiquity. Probably within a decade or so of the funeral, Carter found the outer doorway resealed, a hole replastered and stamped by necropolis officials, and a linen bundle of gold rings knotted up and abandoned on the floor of the annex, as though someone had dropped it running. The storerooms were ransacked. Oils and unguents, which were worth more by weight than gold, were poured out and carried off in skins. Carter's own estimate was that around 60% of the jewelry originally in that tomb was already gone before he ever got there. Everything in the Cairo Museum, everything that toured the world. The mask, the coffins, the throne, the chariots. That is what the thieves left behind, in a small tomb, for a minor king, who died at 19. Now imagine what was in Seti I's, and to be exact about it, because it matters, KV62 isn't the only tomb that came close. KV46, Yuya and Thuya, Tutankhamun's likely great-grandparents, was found in 1905 in extraordinary condition. But it had been entered, it had been picked over, and they weren't pharaohs. For an actual king of Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings, KV62 is the closest thing to intact that has ever been found. That's the record. 65 tombs, 500 years, one near miss. So how did the most secretive burial ground in history get emptied? By the people it employed. The valley didn't fail because the plan was bad. It failed because the plan required 400 years of uninterrupted institutional honesty, and no state has ever managed that. And Egypt, in the end, agreed. Because around 3,000 years ago, the priests of Amun stopped defending the tombs and did something else instead. They went in themselves, They collected what was left of the pharaohs. They unwrapped them, repaired them, rewrapped them, and on the fresh linen, they wrote notes. Which king this was, which tomb he had been moved out of, what date the work was done. Egypt inventoried its own kings as salvage. In handwriting, you can read the labels. Then they moved them out of the valley altogether. Ramesses II, Seti I, Thutmose III, Ahmose, dozens of them, stacked together and hidden in a single shaft in the cliffs above Deir el-Bahari. The greatest kings Egypt ever produced, piled in one anonymous hole in the rock, to keep them away from the men Egypt had hired to bury them. Nobody found that shaft for 3,000 years. Then, in 1881, one family did. And they didn't tell anyone for a decade. That's the next one. And the tomb they never finished robbing has one more question in it. Carter found a wall in KV 62 that some Egyptologists still believe has something behind it. That story is already on the channel. Egypt spent 5 centuries trying to hide 65 doors. It kept better records of the men who opened them. There are more of these files, trial after trial, name after name, in museum drawers in London, Liverpool and Brussels. Subscribe and we'll read the rest of them. Somebody should.